What's up? I'm Sam P. You're here on PUTINWORKTV.
Sam, welcome to PUTINWORKTV. We've enjoyed watching your journey and growth as an artist in the New England music scene and really want to hear more about your story. Our focus is allowing our guests to tell their stories front and center without judgment or opinion. So let's dive in. How did it all begin?
Man, that's a big question. I guess there's like pivotal moments you probably like think about. Probably the earliest one is just like picking up that instrument, right? Like picking up a guitar because, I was like 13 years old and I think I got some, my parents got me some cheap $50 bass or something online or wherever in a yard sale. And it was sort of like, that really is like the key moment because I could have done football. I like love football. I could have done, a number of things, sports or whatever. But I went with this music direction, and I think that's significant too, just because like my parents always supported me, but they're not, they're creatives, but they're not, rock and roll musicians, or they're not like into hip hop or any of the things that I've come to like love in the culture. So it was really cool of them to like support me in that way. But the sort of like next pivotal moment where I, you could say it all started was, I've been playing music and stuff for years, but I was fortunate enough to go on a month-long tour. So I traveled across the entire country with my older brother and kind of like in his age bracket, like a few other musicians, and we had a band. But so 16-year-old me went on a 45-day tour, and that just changed my whole perspective on life and everything. But I think most significantly for like where I'm at now, it was like the first time I saw artists and just people like me organizing their own shows. Because we weren't just playing nightclubs, we would play like a VFW hall where like just a bunch of kids rented out a space, or a church space, rented or borrowed community centers, house shows. So, a lot of, I guess, to sum it up in one instance, the bass thing was significant. I'm 13, but really when I was 16 and I did the tour, like I knew I was a musician, but I kind of had a feeling that I could do more than that and like organize and like bring people together because I was just so inspired by what I saw on like a cross country tour.
Wow. So like, when did you discover your love for hip hop music?
Well, that's interesting because I definitely like heard it, just in high school. Hip hop's everywhere, and I was like, whatever. I was born in '88, so in high school and everything. It was just hip hop was like one of the rising genres or whatever. So, I think it was like, honestly, it was like Pete Rock and CL Smooth was like maybe the first like record that I got because I had good advice. I had people who like knew about the culture and like shared with me, but I didn't really tap in until so many years later. Like it was just one of many genres. But, once I found myself having the opportunity to throw shows in Dorchester and find out where the artists and what the artists wanted to do in the neighborhood that I was in, that's when really I began to like develop a deeper respect and understanding of like hip hop culture. So it's been all along, but I think it got like deep once I started to like realize like what the artists in the community like need and where they're coming from. And it's a journey I'm still on,
So what did you grow up on music wise?
That's a weird question because I feel like, because again, my parents are hip, they're super hip, they're the best, but they weren't, I don't know, I can just imagine me if I ever have kids that I'll be like, this record, check this one out, this song. So they're not music people in the same way. So I really had to find it for myself. But I think like just punk rock is like the easiest way to sort of like sum it up as, being 13 or 14 years old. Like I knew about rock and roll music and stuff, but once I kind of understood like an alternative where it was sort of, I think a lot of people can relate to like the outsider or just like someone who like doesn't belong or doesn't fit in with the rest of like the culture. Punk rock was that sort of music culture that really was like drew me in and it made me realize that, it's good to be unique, it's good to be an individual, and you're not weird, or if you are weird, then you're perfect. So it was really like the punk rock culture, but that ties in with like hip hop culture because those two cultures came out of the basement, so to speak. You know what I mean? Hip hop started as a house party, right? Like punk rock started as house shows and in garages. So I think for me it was always a sort of and Trevo talked about it, sort of like an underground. More than any genre, I think it was like the idea of doing an alternative and not just be part of like the mainstream. And in fact, rejecting most of what we saw and wanting to focus on the underground cultures, like even if it was indie pop or like folk music. Like I've toured as a folk band with my brother singing harmonies, so regardless of the genre, I think it was more about the independent culture, the underground culture, and like, as I would describe it now, it's like artist-run culture.
Yeah.
As opposed to like a corporate influence of some kind.
So, you talk about your parents and your brother. Where did you guys all grow up?
Actually, Braintree, Massachusetts. So y'all know because it's end of the red line, But that's some suburban. That was like the suburban upbringing. It was really good and safe, and my parents like hooked it up for me. But I think by the time I was like 14 or old enough to like take the train in, that's when I started to like explore in the city and go to Harvard Square. See punk rockers with their like spiky hair, or even see people rapping on the street corner or something. Like I started to see like, okay, that's where that culture is, or that's where kind of a deeper culture is, because the suburbs are just sheltered. So by the time I was 18, when I was 16 I did the tour. So I already went across the country. I was always like playing in nightclubs and everything. So as soon as I could, I moved into the city, and I've been living in JP since I was like 18. It's been like 16 years now or whatever. But my family is dope, and they still live on the South Shore of Boston, and that's my ties are close. But I'm almost like an outsider or a newcomer to Boston, right? As opposed to somebody who grew up here. But I try to keep that present in my mind as my perspective, because I think it's just a very different perspective actually growing up in Boston as opposed to from the suburbs, of course.
So, having like moved to Boston when you were 18, what has it been like seeing the artist scene like evolve and change?
It's kind of just like the joy of my life, I guess, is just always being kind of tuned into what different artists and cultures are doing. Probably because of that tour where I saw like the cultures, independent culture, like all over the country. But then, so when I was 18 and moved to Boston, I actually moved in with a bunch of musicians, and what a lot of people describe as like a hippie house, which is like 15 musicians and artists living in a house, paying cheap rent and like having concerts and having poetry readings and open mics and stuff. So I was pretty much like already in right when I moved to Boston, but it was the years from 18 to 25, say, and continues to this day, that I realized that people are really siloed, and I think that's, systemic racism and all sorts of redlining and all sorts of like big, intense like issues with our society are what keep people in their silos. And that's why in 2010, I decided to start the Boston Compass newspaper, because I realized like, oh, these JP kids don't know about the kids in Cambridge who are throwing their like poetry slams. And I didn't even know what was going on in Dorchester or Roxbury at that point, right? I'm like 18-year-old kid from the suburbs. So that has been like the joy of my life, is sort of realizing like, all right, like Dorchester has their own thing going on, like Roxbury has their own thing going on. Like, let's try to, unite these independent artist-run cultures and put them on the same page. So that's what inspired like the Compass newspaper, and that was 2010. So,
so
what is up with that cat though?
Listen, off camera. It's just the heat, and we haven't gotten it spaded. That's what it is. And
but it's not. I don't think it's gonna fuck with us. But I just wanted to make sure that you're.
I would say just project a little louder, so when you are talking, it's just like not on camera at all.
Okay, got it.
But so you talk about how you founded the Boston Compass paper.
Yeah.
And also, I believe you used to do the Black Market.
Yeah, the Black Market was, I used to be part of the Boston Hassle, which is a blog that still runs to this day. But when I started that and ran it for years, we started our flea market called the Black Market in 2014. And then once Black Market opened, or at least once I realized that Black Market was open in Dudley, we decided to change the name because the black culture should have the Black Market. Yeah. But it was really great to like start a sort of a vendor experience and like a marketplace for artists, because up until that point, I was throwing shows and paying artists like what I could to perform, and even do workshops with kids, or go to like school, do different activities and programming in the arts. But the marketplace was really different, because then I could connect with people who, say, like made crafts or had their own record label or something, so it was just another way, and like the newspaper too, I'm just psyched about platforms for artists, so it was just another platform to do. And although I don't do it now, it definitely had a major impact on what I've done and what I want to do.
So why do you think there is like such a lack of infrastructure in the New England like artist scene, considering that you had to go in and create a newspaper to like connect the dots and and you had to create a market for local craftsmen, and you helped found like the Dorchester Art Project. Like, why do you think that need is here in the first place?
I do think, and not to get like too like history major on you, because that is, I just love history. I'm a student of history, and I think it's like important for us to know what came before and everything to do it right. But I think just like I don't know, Puritan sort of, and just like the history of Boston, like as far back as like the founding of Boston, it's really, and even now it's like about like schools and hospitals and the sort of like bigger industries, and the arts sector, the arts industry, just doesn't get the same sort of respect that it deserves. And so I think it's kind of interesting, like it's amazing that actually that we can segue all of this into like one question, but really like from doing the market, from opening the venue and running the venue and having such a great building community, booking bands, all these activities I've done made me realize that they're all great, but if we can't sustainably keep them and keep a place for them in like society in a respected way that actually has money and an influx of support and resources, then we're not really going to be able to sustain it long term. So that's why I've started to get more into like the advocacy space, where I'm talking to foundations or talking to people at the city or talking to institutions of all kinds and kind of explaining like, artists can't just do your mural for $500 or $1,000. Like, artist communities and the organizations that keep artists active, they need big time support. And why shouldn't they have what the hospitals and the schools have? It should be a bigger industry. So I think that's why there isn't that like infrastructure, is because historically we haven't had that. We haven't been a place for that. So it's just it just takes more advocacy and more, I think just more like, I guess advocacy is just the word, but space creation, I mean, it takes us all, right? It's a community thing. So that's why, from Thrill to Dorchester Art Project or wherever, the people who are doing their thing, I think it's just important for them to be able to do their thing. And that's why I'm like really focused right now on trying to get resources and changing funding models so that the organizers of artists can have more resources, because then ultimately the artists will have resources. But without the infrastructure, without the organizing bodies, we won't get there. So
So, Sam, tell me about being one of the main founders of the Dorchester Art Project, like the history of that, and like some of your proudest shows that you've thrown there, and just like why you did it.
Cool. Yeah, I love to think about it. It's actually a great story because just great people. I mean, it was the same sort of thing with like the silos, where I was talking about these awesome communities doing their art in different neighborhoods but not knowing each other. DAP, the Dorchester Art Project, was actually started by these students from the SMFA, the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, as like kind of like a senior project is my understanding. And anyone who's watching this from the crew, let me know what I'm getting wrong. But from my understanding, like for their senior project, they wanted to throw an art show and do kind of an exhibit with the artists. But they found this space in Dorchester that had affordable rent, and they just moved in and took over, made it basically artist studios. And from what I know about that space too, like it had been a recording studio in the past. Like people from Dorchester had run that space. Acorn, this like nonprofit, had offices there and stuff. So there's a lot of history in that space. But I think it was like 2015 or something, these students took over the lease there. And the reason I bring that up is because that was the only reason it came into my possession, is because through my work with Boston Compass and connecting the silos, those artists knew who I was. And when it came time for their lease to be up, they offered it to me in my organization, the nonprofit Brain Arts. So, that was, my way in. But at that time, it wasn't Dorchester artists. It wasn't anyone from the neighborhood doing work in there. It was Dorchester Art Project was a bunch of students from the museum school. I think David, and maybe even Jamal, like, are from the area. So they had a few artists, like local artists in there, but it certainly wasn't prioritizing Dorchester. So, and it was kind of like two things happening at once. Like they were trying to pass it off, and my organization was trying to have a venue. So it was really like the perfect kind of moment where these artists that I knew offered us this space. But the idea that we had, where we were trying to have a music venue and stuff, that really changed quickly once I realized, like, I don't know, I guess it was just my kind of a concept or something, but if we were going to be in Dorchester, we should be for Dorchester artists. So, I don't know, that was kind of like a vague concept, but I sort of let it be a guiding light for me. I can't say exactly why. It just seemed like the right thing to do. But I'm glad that I did do it, because it's sort of been like, another great joy of my life. Like I was talking about, is sort of discovering the culture in Dorchester. So we took over the space basically like 2017. So it was like the end of 2017, we took over the lease. And I think for the first like 6 to 9 months, like maybe we did some shows there, and we were operating our activities like we had been doing, like organizing concerts for so many years, 10 years. But I think we were really like improving the space. So I like rebuilt the stage with some help from some awesome volunteers, and we used our volunteer power to like entirely volunteer run. Like we weren't paid at all for the entire year, like fixing walls, painting things, like the electricity, the plumbing, putting in a new sink. I mean, there's awesome documentation of all this, but 2017, 2018 was like really the building year. And then I guess it was like in the middle of 2018, we started the DAP open mic, and meeting artists like DJ Ysham and Brandy Blaze, like who we had booked before in like 2016, before we had the space. Knowing that they were from Dorchester, like they really helped me meet more artists from Dorchester, and just being there on the street. Like I first met with like Dwiz Cash, Edwin, the embroidery artist. Like I met him on the street outside of DAP, and he was kind of just asking me what's up, and I was asking him what's up with him. So just being on the street, I sort of like met artists, but then also the artists I knew in Dorchester were introducing me to more. So actually with Ysham's help, we started the DAP open mic, and that was really, that's like the hook to hang your hat on. That was like every month we were having an open mic and inviting specifically Dorchester artists. So, meeting Edwin, or I don't even know, OFATs, like these folks that I met at like different shows or something, I made sure that I like texted them every single month to be like, OFATs, you got to be at the open mic. Jakor, you got to be at the open mic. Like whoever it was, I just tried to like focus in on that and try to like bring Dorchester artists together. And it was pretty clear to me that it wasn't just me. Like this culture already exists here. We were just opening our doors to it. But once we started to have the open mic, like all these folks who knew each other were coming out, and indeed more people got to know each other. So it was definitely good, but it wasn't, we didn't start this culture. We just opened our door to it and gave it a place to like thrive. So that's just been, again, it's just like a very meaningful thing in my life. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to meet, like, yeah, you were talking about some of the great, the moments or something, like Brandy Blaze and like Jay Hunt shooting videos in our space, or, a lot of like the hardcore punk shows and like the Boston hardcore scene, doing a lot of shows there. So we would have like hip hop and hardcore in the same place. And I just think that's beautiful, and especially coming from like I was talking about being 16 and going on tour and seeing the subcultures, that just seemed like peanut butter and jelly to me. I was just so happy. But definitely, memorable moments beside the music video, like C4 did a big show there. Red Shades did a talk where we did like an artist talk on how to be a musician in Boston, like tips for that. So some just like key events, but really it was 5 nights a week we were doing events. We won the Boston Music Award in 2019 for like the best intimate live music venue. Like these are just like incredible moments that like, kind of were just affirming of the work that I was trying to do, and just to show that the community wanted such a thing. So yeah, just definitely like big moments, but kind of all changed with COVID for sure. So since then it's just all been different.
So talk to me about, so you talk about all these different platforms, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But like, what is it in you that was like, I need to go out and fix this problem? You feel me? Because that's like not what a lot of people do when they find a problem. So,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He was like, I'm going to make the Boston Compass. I'm going to make this flea market. I'm going to found a venue. You know what I'm saying? So what is it internally that makes you like, I got to solve these problems?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's weird because it is like selfless in a way, but I was just doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't getting paid to do it, so I think there's an element of just like volunteering to do it is, I don't know, it's like pure or something in that way. But definitely seeing other organizers, like you, Steph, you know what I mean? You're like a huge inspiration to me, just the way you move and the things you do. And I can see that you're not like making money on it and you're just doing it for the love. And don't get me wrong, you're going to make it a business. It's going to work. You know what I mean? You should be paid, but just like, seeing other organizers, like book events, create a studio space, like do interviews and publish a zine or make a newspaper or do videos. Those are the things that really inspired me. I think there was this guy, Ben Sisto, who like booked shows back in the day in Boston. He was a Mass Art student. He like booked a bunch of big shows at Mass Art. But I remember one like big moment for me in that 16-year-old year is when I played a show at a church in Boston that Ben Sisto booked. And it was like, well-attended show and cool and everything, but I remember seeing that guy walking around and saying like, all right, so this dude organized the show. Kind of understanding already that there wasn't enough money for him to be like making a bunch of money off of the thing. It was like a pure thing. So just inspired me to like want to give back in that way. And sort of as the years have gone on, I've realized how much privilege I have and really just want to throw that down. So yeah, the inspiration of all these awesome people, but then yeah, just realizing the sort of like the position that I was in, like healthy white male, you know what I mean? Like I have resources and privilege that just like, I don't know, I just want to give back, I guess. I just want to make sure that what I'm doing is like helping other people like lift up. So that has really evolved in the past few years, and just sort of like with just like social justice movements and like understanding the more the dynamics in the city and like the communities that have been under resourced over the years. But even when I was 16 and really didn't know about race dynamics, I still was like, well, like I have it pretty good. I'll volunteer to book. It doesn't bother me. I'll be here for this show, and I'll be the first to arrive and the last to leave, and I won't get paid, and we'll just have a fun show. So it's something. Yeah, I've just been really fortunate. So
yeah. So where do you see the New England scene in 5 years?
Man, I hope it's just like more on the map than it is. I think we do good work and everything, but I just really want to see. I want to see like a bigger systematic change for the culture. And that I mean, and it's funny too, because like I'm not all about like politicians, but I think that like if the city of Boston and if our like leaders and elected officials could actually like make new models for funding streams to reach the actual people creating the culture, like yourselves, like the people who are in their studio spaces, like working so hard. I think what I want to see is like the state and the elected officials like rise up the culture in that way. So I want to be like part of that movement, is to like just bring more resources to the people and the culture. So that's what, in 5 years I see us being a leader in the arts sector, and say for other communities and other people in California or whatever to like look to New England and say, wow, like the government in New England is investing in their artists. Like these activists and artists have found a way to create new models to where foundations aren't so restrictive in the way they issue their funds out to the organizations. Like that these funders actually know who the people they are funding, because funders put out these polls and they put out these grants, but they don't know who needs the money, and the people who really do need the money don't know about them. So I really want to find a way to like connect those dots and like be that bridge, and really like frankly just turn the faucet on for the resources for the culture, because the money's there in all these sectors, but the arts sectors need it. So I hope that in 5 years time it's a windfall of awesome resources coming to the culture, and I'm just excited about all the possibilities that would come with that.
So in doing all this work, what has been the hardest thing?
I don't know, the hardest thing. I mean, it's probably like the hardest thing. That's a good one. Because I think like a lot of the things that have been hard have been the greatest things that have happened to me, just being hit with such realities, or breaking up with toxic partnerships, or being hated on, for trying to do the right thing. Like these are the hardest things, but they're also the greatest things because they allowed me to like change and be healthier. So it's kind of hard to talk about the hard stuff because I'm in a really, like, I'm trying to be in a positive mindset where like, yeah, these things were hard, but without them, I wouldn't be where I am now, which is really just focusing on the health and well-being of my people, whether it's the artists I book or the volunteers or the staff that I work with. I think that, it's all for nothing if the team that you manage isn't like healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally. So yeah, I guess maybe if I had to answer it, it would be the hardest thing is the long-term realization that no matter what you do, it just doesn't mean anything if you can't do it with care for the people that you're doing it with. Because, I think, just, and it happens with everyone, so it's okay, like, to admit your mistakes, but people have been hurt, doing this work, and I just want that to stop. I think I want to make sure that, we're caring for everyone at all times instead of just sacrificing ourselves to get more work done, so I think it's funny because put in work, right? Like that, I think you got to put in the work for yourself and to really take care of yourself first and foremost, and like love yourself first, because if you can't do that, you're not going to lead healthy teams, and the work that you do won't be worth it if people are getting hurt.
Word, bro. Jeez.
I know I cut it really deep there, but
No.
that's the serious,
I feel like, dang, let me see. Hold on. Yeah. So what is it about the art that makes you move the way you do? It makes you work so hard? Because obviously all this is around art and artists. You know what I'm saying? So what is it about the art that resonates with you that makes you move?
Man, I don't know. It's a really good question because I like so many different things, you know. I mean, for those of you who like really know me out there, you know, like I'm like into some like harsh noise. Like I'll see somebody taking like an electric fan and just bending the metal inside of it while it's on and like creating like a soundscape out of like bent metal. And I can see that as like a beautiful art form. But then I can see someone spit a verse or freestyle and see the art form in that and like the cadence and the delivery and I don't know, just like I love lyrics, right? I love poetry. Seeing the poets in the community, like I love the fact that like at the open mic, especially like the poets and the musicians are united. Because even the Boston Music Awards, it's like it should be the Boston Art Awards or something. You know, it's not inclusive of the types of art that are out there. So I think for me, it's hard to answer that question because it's such a spectrum. Like I love heavy rock and roll. I love drums. You know, I love funk. You know, I love like bass and drums all day. Like I love beats. I love metal, you know, so and then I love country music, you know, I love old timey music. I love spirituals. I love gospel music, you know, so I think like it's the full spectrum for me. But I don't know, I guess I just like see that in the artists that I work with on a daily basis, you know, just like meeting a great MC is like really inspiring to me, like and just the same way as I meet like an awesome touring band. So regardless of the artistry, I just love seeing people do their thing.
Where you got any last words for the camera?
Oh, gee, last words, man. Just find your people and love them because I've done a good job, I think, of like finding awesome people in my life. But I just hope that I can like do a better job of caring for them and myself in this journey because all of the art and the creativity and the culture. It needs to be done with care. Like that's the future, and that's what like I hope that our generation and the generations after me like continue to bring. I mean, that's what I see. I'm inspired by the younger people, is that it's like care and health and wellness first. So that's really what I want to share.
Right.
Thank you to Put In Work TV. I'm Sam P, and we'll see you.